Hello, and welcome to the Arizona Foundation's Bridge Forum Mental Health Beyond the Stigma 2020. Welcome to our in-studio audience and all of you online tuning into our live stream from across the nation. We are here in Indiana at the Hyatt Regency, Indianapolis. Thank you to General Manager Kyle Houston and the Hyatt Regency for not only hosting us, but for your strong partnership. Our mission at the Arizona Foundation is to create and empower heroes in our communities. My name is Ron Williams, President of the Arizona Foundation and United States Air Force veteran, Desert Storm era veteran. I'm honored to serve as Master of Ceremonies for this important forum today. At our Bridge Forums, we respectfully do not shy away from the hard conversations because we understand that not everything is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. We are so honored to have some very special guests with us today. By a virtual presentation, we look forward to our keynote address by our nation's doctor. He is the 20th Surgeon General of the United States, and as the Surgeon General, he holds the rank of Vice Admiral in the U.S. Public Health Service Commission's Corps. Thank you to Dr. Jerome Adams as we look forward to your keynote address. Another special guest we are pleased to acknowledge is Indiana's Chief Legal Officer. As Indiana's Attorney General, he is the top vote getter of any elected official in Indiana history. Let's welcome the 43rd Attorney General of Indiana, A.G. Curtis Hill. Thank you. We're also so privileged to have one of the last living icons from the early civil rights movement with us today. As a young assistant, he knew and worked alongside Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and many of our civil rights leaders who are no longer with us. Here to moderate our panel discussion and flying in from our nation's capital, please join me in giving a warm welcome to civil rights icon Dr. Benjamin Chavis Jr. Out of an abundance of caution for the safety and concerns of our forum participants and the rising COVID numbers in the country, the invitation for this in-person attendance was greatly restricted. This is our 9th forum this year during a pandemic, and it's always safety first. Whether it's professional sports team owners, top executives, police chiefs, elected officials, public health officials, or the faith, youth, and other community leaders, it's always safety first. We certainly want to thank our respected panelists for joining us for this forum. Please hold your applause until I introduce them all. We have with us Dr. Virginia Caine, Director of Marion County Public Health Department. We also have Judge David Certo, Marion County Superior Court. We have Senior Chaplain Jim Bontrager, Elkhart Police Department. And we also have Marion County Prosecutor Ryan Mears. Thank you for all of us. Thank you for being here today. And we have two special guest community leaders who we'll hear from, and that's President of the Indianapolis NAACP, Ms. Chrystal Ratcliffe, and President and CEO of the Indianapolis Urban League, Anthony Tony Mason. Let's give a warm welcome to all of our program participants. And we certainly want to thank everyone who supports the Arizona Foundation and the work we do across the country. Thank you to today's sponsors and supporters. First, the Indiana Attorney General's Office, well represented today by Attorney General Curtis Hill and his wonderful team members. Just want to mention them: Chief of Staff Mary Beth Bonaventura, Jean Marie Leisure, Sam Chris, Garrett Bascom, and Shelley Triol. These good people, let me tell you, they get the job done, and we certainly would not be here today if it were not for their commitment and assistance on the ground and their willingness to be a strong partner in this effort. Other sponsors and supporters we need to quickly thank is the Indiana Drug Enforcement Association, the Indianapolis NAACP, the Indianapolis Urban League, the National Newspaper Publishers Association, and the Hyatt Regency Indianapolis, and finally, Vitanya Brain Performance Centers. We call them the future of brain performance, a company revolutionizing modern neuroscience and maximizing brain function. I just want to say a quick word about Vitanya. I've known about their program from years ago. I've seen where they've advanced, I'm an actual participant in the program going into my 6th month, and I know just in 6 months what they've done for me as far as some of the issues that I was dealing with vertigo and some other things. And what they do is they help you improve restful sleep, strategic planning and tactful execution, complex decision-making and problem-solving, focus, memory, and reaction time. So thank you, Vitanya, for doing all that you do and your continued partnership and support of our veterans, first responders, and across the nation. Also want to thank our PR firm, Evolve Public Relations and Marketing, and the full-service global event production company, PSAV. Last but not least, the Heroes on the Foundation. We're honored to have our founders here with us today, Alan A.P. Powell, Chairman of AP and Associates, LLC and Strategic Partners, and Aaron Baer, CEO of Aaron Baer and Company. Also want to thank our Foundation Advisory Board members, represented by those supporting this forum, and they are Heath McCarter, Dennis Prince, Rashandra Carnes, Matt O'Brien, and myself, Ron Williams. And a special thank you to two gentlemen who were great supporters the last time we were here in Indiana, and that's Pastor Richard Reynolds with New Revelation Christian Church for stepping up and really helping us reach out to the faith community, and the multifaceted, multi-talented Amp Harris with another major power move. So let's please give our sponsors and supporters a big, warm welcome round of applause. All right. We are honored that all of you have entrusted the Heroes on the Foundation with the privilege of hosting this important discussion. Many times, as we know, mental illness and mental health are not discussed and are seen as taboo. So let's get right into our program. To open our forum with welcoming remarks is Aaron Baer, the CEO of Aaron Baer and Company. Aaron has a bachelor's degree from Indiana Tech, a master's degree from Indiana University, and still holds a MBA in global management from the Thunderbird International School of Management. He's a strategy and innovation consultant, a serial entrepreneur, and the co-founder of the Heroes on the Foundation. Please join me in welcoming to the podium Mr. Aaron Baer.
Thank you, Ron. Well, I just wanted to welcome all of you here in the room as well as online to the Bridge Forum on Mental Health. Over the past few weeks, we've witnessed America become fully engaged in our political process with the highest voting turnout with over 150 million people voting. This election engaged more people than ever as we fight equality, injustice, climate, the health, and as we will speak about today, mental health. The Bridge Forum was created to solve difficult problems and create uncomfortable conversations with the right people in the room. Our goal is to bridge parties, to bridge communities, to bridge law enforcement, to bridge solutions to health, and to bridge solutions to mental health. First, this pandemic has shed light on the inequities and injustices. This is a primary conversation that we must focus on and overcome. To me, there's no bigger issue than creating civil rights, human rights, and equality for everyone. Something Dr. Benjamin Chavis has fought for his entire life. We're blessed to have him lead this conversation today. Second, the pandemic has given us time to breathe and rethink our relationship with people, profits, and our planet. All interlinked as we must start thinking about several generations after us. We must start thinking about our kids and our kids' kids. Making short-term decisions will not serve us well. Stealing the future is no longer an option with what we know. Third, we are currently enduring and putting our best foot forward to overcoming humanity's biggest health crisis in over 100 years. We have witnessed the scientific and medical community come together across the world to solve this challenge. The ability to create several solutions for a vaccine and work together is something we should celebrate. Lastly, the crisis has created a change at a pace that most of us are unable to handle. Mental health continues to rise up as an issue in these conversations that we have, and that's why we bring it here today. Later, we'll be joined by Dr. Jerome Adams, our current United States Surgeon General, to share with us America's need to respond to this mental health crisis. From these issues and concerns, we recognize mental health is the next pandemic. The United Nations report says that mental health and well-being of whole societies have been severely impacted by this crisis are a priority to be addressed immediately. The American Mental Health Counselors Association is projected 100 million Americans will experience a mental health disorder in 2020. That's a third of our population. Research suggests that the adult Black community is 20% more likely to experience anxiety and depression from everything that's going on. Given that the Black community exists at the intersection of racism, classism, and health inequity, the mental health needs are often exacerbated and mostly unfilled. To focus on law enforcement, a recent study found that police officers had a 69% higher risk of suicide than the general population. 85% of first responders have reported mental health symptoms. A full 1/3 reported clinical diagnoses of depression and post-traumatic stress disorder. We are in a society reaching out for help with very little resources to help. Yet today we have some champions for the cause in the room, the few that have been fighting this battle against mental health for many years. Also, companies like our sponsor, Vitanya Brain Performance, are leading the brain capital fight for veterans, law enforcement, and the community to deal with trauma, PTSD, and realign their brain through electrical and chemical rebalancing. They have created an innovative tele-neurotech solution to optimize brain performance, and something that we're fully behind as we expand our impact and take action on many of these bridge forums that we work on. Nonetheless, I hope these facts have your attention. There are some pressing issues in the world. The health of human beings, their civil rights, and mental health should rise to the top of that list. Party aside, we must learn to be human again, to forgive, to love, to listen, to take care of each other, and especially to listen with empathy. We need to recognize the cry for help. Law enforcement is crying for help. The community is crying for help. We can do this better. I hope that each of you can lean into this conversation, and may Godspeed take you to act on what you learned here today. On behalf of the Arizona Board, thank you for being here, and thank you for listening with empathy.
Thank you, Aaron. Next on our agenda, we will have our invocation, followed by the singing of the national anthem and the Pledge of Allegiance. As you stand for the singing of the national anthem, please remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. Now, for our invocation, please join me in welcoming to the podium the Senior Pastor of Antioch Baptist Church, Pastor and Dr. Clyde Posley. Welcome him to the podium.
If you would please bow your heads in a moment of prayer. Eternal God, our Father, Creator and Lord of all, we thank you for the privilege of participating in this day. We recognize that we would not be here, first of all, were it not for your grace, but also we would not be here if we did not have a purpose in your plan for today. And for that, we tell you thank you. We ask you today to help us to further grapple and tussle with the stigma that so easily besets the progress necessary to bring mental health and its powerful healing to the citadel of every soul. Today, we ask you to help us think together, consider together, reason together, so that we can help one another and others in our efforts toward being clothed and in our right minds. Today, whether it inner city disenfranchisement, police involvement, restrictions on immigrants' mental health care, death during pregnancy, in the African American culture, there are so many issues that stand ready to assault the mental stability of us as humans. But you, oh God, we believe by faith have the power to heal it all. We trust you today, and we turn this panel and this forum over into the hands of a capable, all-powerful, and all-knowing God. We trust you, and we speak your favor over this forum and all of its intentions today. In Jesus' name I pray, amen.
Thank you for your powerful invocation, Dr. Posley. Please stand. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we held at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave. Thank you. Join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please be seated. All right, I am excited today. Next on our agenda, we have the nationally acclaimed Harold Branch III. We call him HB, soon to be Dr. HB. He's a speaker, trainer, entrepreneur, and poet, and a proud Phoenix, Arizona resident. His life story was featured in an MTV documentary. He is the founder of one of the country's largest open mic poetry events called Home-Based Poetry. We can't thank him enough for taking the time to join us again in Indiana to share his amazing talents. As a doctoral student, I'm looking forward to calling him Doc HB. To share a piece called My Mother's Son, please welcome Harold Branch III. Let's welcome.
Good morning. Good morning. Mental health has a stigma that is unfortunate and is the result of the loss of a lot of people. In the Black community, it hasn't always been accepted, and we're still trying to fight through that. And it's a passion of mine because I grew up struggling through it myself. I lost my mother to suicide when I was 2. And being from the west side of Chicago and having to grow up without her caused its own challenges. And it was never okay to talk about, and it was always an issue. Thank God I had poetry. So I would like to share a poem that I wrote with you. And my whole goal is to speak honestly and from the heart, and to put an emotion and a face to this challenge. Is that all right? It's all right. My mother's son. Trying to win the campaign as governor of my own state of mind, I rewind time a little over 22 years to the day my mother realized she couldn't handle too many more tears, that life was a scandal and the future held many more fears. Her will to live candle was swiftly dimming. The Grim Reaper stood next to her grinning because they had been fighting for years, and he knew he was finally winning. Like first snow, her emotional downfall was beginning. It was obvious she had a torn soul and not a thread of happiness to do the mending. 6 million ways to die and one was chose. I'm sure she closed her eyes as the gun rolls. The bullet made love to her mind as the August sun froze. She figured her 3 children be better off if she died, and her dawn never again rose. And ever since I was 2 years old, I've asked, why did my mother have to go? And they always replied, no one really knows what was going through her mind or why she chose to redefine God's grand design. But that answer just wasn't adequate. My young heart just couldn't handle it. My thoughts became frantic. Into the day I accepted that my manic depression was genetic. My suicidal thoughts moved me like they was telekinetic, just like the one who birthed me. I am my mother's son, sweating in my sleep, dreaming about the ones who hurt me. No matter how I try to bless the world, it always seems to tease and curse me. I can feel the hands of time closing in on my body like the clock was trying to search me. Mama, I understand. Because the same ones that worked you to the grave irk me to this day. I'm a grown, educated man. I know I shouldn't feel this way, but I often go to sleep wishing I just wouldn't wake up, because my heart is always confused and unstable, like I'm constantly recovering from a really bad breakup, and I'm insecure about my inner beauty, like an adolescent girl in puberty who just left the house wearing too much damn makeup. The towel isn't enough. I'm ready to throw in the entire linen closet and just give up. I'm my mother's son, and I'm sure it breaks her heart that her baby boy doesn't want to breathe anymore. But opening my eyes is a chore. Pain, murder, and suffering I don't want to see anymore. So I invite death with my pen and walk through the world with the tight grin to hide the expression of depression. They say that life is a test. If so, I haven't been studying my lessons because I'm not prepared for these questions. They say when you die is when you get to do your resting. But I'm tired now. Everyone eventually expires from this world of desire. The only question is how. I can even narrow down when, naturally within the next 60 or so years. But by then, I would have lost 60 or so peers, cried 60 million or so tears, waiting for death to rear its ugly head. But beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and the grave is pretty attractive to a young man who thought he was a soldier, but now waits impatiently for his life to be over. I'm tired of carrying the world's drama boulders on my emotionally underdeveloped shoulders. The temperature of God's heart must be dropping steadily, because every day the world grows just a little bit colder, and I don't even want to grow just a little bit older. I'm tired of living in a place with no rules. I'm tired of trying to build a career and love life with no tools, like sending an obese man with bunions to a church with no pews. And I can only stand for so long, and I hate myself because my obituary must state that I never really planned to go wrong. I was merely the epitome of a man who couldn't go on, useless like an NFL quarterback who couldn't throw long. I'm the Kaiser Sose of falling down, because one day you'll all look around and poof, I'll be gone. Thank you for listening.
Oh, wow. Thank you, Doc HB. Thank you again for flying in to share your talents for this important forum. Now, for opening remarks, I get the great privilege to introduce Curtis Hill, the 43rd Attorney General of Indiana. As Indiana's Chief Legal Officer, Hill oversees a staff of more than 400 employees spread across multiple divisions. On November 8, 2016, Hill was elected Attorney General in record-breaking fashion. More than 1.64 million Hoosiers cast ballots for Hill, making him the top vote-getter of any elected official in Indiana history. He took office as Attorney General on January 9, 2017. He earned his Bachelor of Science degree from business from Indiana University, Bloomington, and later received his law degree from Indiana University as well. In 2002, Hill ran for his first public office, winning the first of his 4 elections as Elkhart County Prosecuting Attorney with nearly 80% of the vote. Under Hill's leadership, the Office of the Prosecuting Attorney successfully seized more than $2 million in criminal assets. Through the asset forfeiture program, criminal assets were seized by law enforcement and then ordered forfeited by the court. The proceeds were then distributed back to law enforcement for reinvestment in crime fighting. He has served on many boards, including the Board of Governors for the Indiana State Bar Association and Board of Regents for the National College of District Attorneys. That's just a small bit of his extensive bio. So please join me in welcoming to the podium Indiana's Attorney General, Curtis Hill.
Thank you, Ron. Thank you, everyone, for being here live, and thank you for those of you who've joined us online. I want to give a special shout out to HB for a poem that was so riveting and so indicative of why we're here today. You know, a few weeks ago, we had the privilege of joining in this room to talk about very real issues that are affecting not only this community, but our state and our nation. And that's the issue of law enforcement and racial reconciliation. These are very important issues, and we had a robust discussion on that particular occasion. And the seeds of today's discussion were grown there because what we want to do is continue to peel this back and dig deeper into the root causes of despair within our communities. And when we talk about mental health, that's an area that is absolutely critical to this conversation, not in the sense of the ordinary state of mental health, but mental health as it applies to law enforcement. Mental health and stability as it applies to the community, and what goes into the loss of humanity. You know, many of us have seen examples of law enforcement behavior that we find disturbing, and seems as a loss of humanity on the part of some police. But one of the things that we have to look at in understanding where this comes from is what goes on in the mind of a police officer. You know, many police officers start their day and get a call immediately for a life-threatening situation. They will then go on to their next call that will be some type of help to the community, then on to another call that will engage another life-threatening situation, and then they break for lunch. And then they get back on and there's another high-stress moment. Perhaps they go to the scene of a suicide, or they go to the scene of a crushing traffic accident where there's death and destruction, and then they go home for dinner. But the one constant is this continuing trauma that goes on in the life of a police officer that goes unmet. Police officers, like military folks, don't talk a lot about the trauma that they face on a daily basis. Not just a daily basis, often an hourly basis. And so when we look at someone and say, how has this person lost their humanity, we have to look back at the history and the trauma and the insulation that people build up to keep themselves from feeling. How did this person commit this act? Don't they feel? Well, think about it. Your body and your mind go through mechanisms of healing, of insulation, of protection, protecting your mental health. And so one of the things that we want to talk about and we want to examine is the mental health of police officers, what they go through, what they experience, where that stress comes from, so that we can what? So that we can understand, not excuse, but so that we can understand what goes on in the mind of a police officer that may lead to bad behavior, so that we can delve in, intercept, and correct before the next bad thing happens. Equally in the black community or all communities, we see signs of stress expressed beautifully by HB in daily lives. I recall as a small boy, I would be kicking the ball in my yard. I lived in a neighborhood, an all-white neighborhood back in the 60s, and back then there were some of our neighbors that were not too happy about us being there. And as I was kicking my ball in the backyard, my mom would come out and lovingly but sternly remind me that if that ball went into the neighbor's yard, the ball now belonged to the neighbor. And that was because my mom was offering no excuse for anyone to hurt her baby. And she was building in me a protective coating so that I would think in the same manner. We now refer to this as the talk that so many of our youngsters require to insulate them and prepare them for a world that may be harmful. Does that affect someone's mental stability? Does it impact your mental stability to be a black person who walks into a store and constantly has someone looking at them suspiciously as though they were going to steal something? There's probably not a black person in this country that doesn't have a similar story of walking in under that type of suspicion or being pulled over under suspicious circumstances of some type of activity that makes them think that someone else thinks they are inferior or a danger. And that insulation builds up, and that mental psyche becomes who they are and impacts how they think. And so is it not unusual that someone in the black community would see an act performed by a police officer and think, well, that was a bad thing that happened because of the history that we have, because of what my mom planted in my head about that ball going into a yard? These are the things that we want to talk about. These are the things that we want to examine, because if we can understand where these challenges and stresses come from, we can appreciate ways to correct and solve these problems. I want to thank all of the participants who've joined us here today, my friends on the panel, Dr. Caine, Judge Certo, my good friend from Elkhart, Jim Bontrager, and the prosecutor, my colleague, Mears, for being here to share with you their insights into these issues. I want to thank Tony Mason and Chrystal Ratcliffe from the Urban League and the NAACP to represent the community interest in these discussions. And our challenge here is not to simply discuss mental health as it relates to law enforcement, mental health as it relates to the black community. Our challenge here is to go beyond simply talking about these challenges and taking steps to improve, making sure that we don't need to have forums of this nature where we come together as neighborhoods, where we come together in businesses, where we sit down as friends and neighbors and speak openly about the things that are difficult to speak about, so that we can move forward, so that we can have understanding, so that we can practice the real solution to all that troubles us, and that is forgiveness. Recognizing that each one of us has our own problems, each one of us falls short, and the path to freedom is through forgiveness. So I want to thank everyone here today. I look forward to hearing from my good friend, Dr. Adams, who has graciously agreed to come here from the nation's capital. We're proud to have a native son serving in such a capacity and to offer us his insight that will be of assistance to us here in Indiana as well as to the nation. And I look forward to continuing these discussions and continuing the effort to heal this nation, moving forward through this process and beyond. Thank you very much, and God bless each and every one of you.
Thank you so much for your opening comments, Attorney General Curtis Hill. Next, I get the great pleasure to introduce our first guest speaker. Ms. Chrystal Ratcliffe is the president of the Indianapolis NAACP branch 3053. She has spent her entire adult life in a position of empowering people. Chrystal is a retired United Auto Worker union activist and has spent the last 24 years in leadership roles where she has demonstrated a strong passion for labor, civil rights, and leadership. In addition, she continues as the community chairperson for the United Auto Workers and is vice president of the M.P.H Auxiliary Americanism Council. Please join me in welcoming Ms. Chrystal Ratcliffe.
Thank you. My name is Chrystal Ratcliffe, and I bring you greetings from the Greater Indianapolis NAACP branch. Health and equality for all Americans include a healthy life and high-quality health care for everyone. I want to thank for the opportunity to briefly speak about mental health and to be a part of the Bridge Forum. Too many people in the U.S. still have no health insurance or lack of significant health insurance. Police killings among unarmed Black Americans are responsible for more than 50 million additional days of poor mental health per year among African Americans. This mental health burden is comparative to associate with diabetes as a disease that strikes one out of five African Americans. Fatal police shootings is the sixth leading cause of death for men ages of 25 to 29 across all racial groups. The lifetime risk of dying from police violence is the highest from ages 30 to 35, and it applies to men and women of all races. About 1 in 5 Americans struggle with mental health, regardless of their race. African Americans are 20% more likely to have serious psychological distress than their white counterparts. Suicide is the third leading cause of death among African Americans ages 15 to 24 due to mental health. I give you these statistics because it's so important for us to understand where we are with mental health. And we know as our police officers struggle every day, and I come from what they call an Army brat, what it is to even be in a military family and have to deal with that day in and day out. These things are very important to us as a community and our families. Mental health is an issue. I would like to leave you in saying, it is clear that depression and other mental illnesses are just as important for African Americans, particularly African American men, as they are for Americans in general. Ignoring these problems or pretending that they don't exist will not make them go away. So that is why we're here today, to talk about mental health and what we can do to make it better in our communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Chrystal Ratcliffe. Our next guest speaker is President and CEO of the Indianapolis Urban League, Mr. Anthony Tony Mason. Tony Mason is a visionary leader, has a passion for service, and has dedicated his entire career to initiatives designed to enhance the quality of life for Indianapolis residents. Tony is only the third president in the history of the Indianapolis Urban League, succeeding Joseph Slash and the late Sam Jones. So please welcome Mr. Anthony Tony Mason.
Good evening, everyone. My name's Tony Mason, and I'm president and CEO of the Indianapolis Urban League. and I would like to thank the Arizona Foundation for returning to Indianapolis to conduct today's Bridge Forum on mental health. I want to make sure that I thank President Williams, the co-founders Aaron Baer and Alan A.P. Powell, my friend, for choosing Indy again and encouraging dialogue on this critical issue. I would also like to thank the panelists and everyone who's participating today, because this is such a critical issue that affects everyone. And I want to especially acknowledge my good friend and mentor on the panel today, Dr. Virginia Caine. And here's why. When I assumed this position 6 years ago, one of the first meetings I had as president and CEO of the Indianapolis Urban League was with Dr. Caine. And she probably does not remember this, but she told me there were two things that I needed to understand and learn quickly, was the impact of the social determinants of health and the importance of mental health. And when she said that at that time, I didn't understand it, I didn't get it. But over time, you come to learn that everything and everyone connects to everything and everyone. And so what do I mean by that? At the Urban League, every day we work to empower communities and change lives, and we do that through a myriad of programs and services. And we're particularly strong in the area of workforce development. And so I can tell you that each year, through our workforce development initiatives and all of our other programs and services, we're impacting nearly 10,000 people. But when you drill down into the work that we're doing in workforce development, 25% of our clients are dealing with some mental health issue or challenge. And so when you combine that with systemic racism, institutional racism, lack of access to quality health care, quality treatment, and you add on top of that 400 years of trauma that is encoded on all of our DNA, what do you have? Here in Indianapolis, we have 250,000 black people. 28% are poor. When you consider our city and our region, nearly 40% of people are poor or working poor, all people. 70% of our children fail standardized exams. They are in struggling, under-resourced schools, who also have been tasked with addressing all of the social ills and the burdens that the child brings to school with them each and every day. You also have the challenge of 70%, and this is according to the Brookings Institution, 70% of black people being in jobs that are considered poor or bad jobs, meaning low wages with no health benefits. And so when you bring all of this together and you add in food deserts, where nearly 82,000 people in this community do not have access to healthy, quality food, then all health-related issues, and especially mental health, are exacerbated. You add COVID-19 and the pandemic, everything is exacerbated. And so forums like today are important. We conduct forums similar to this in this community through the Greater Indianapolis Progress Committee and the Race and Cultural Relations Leadership Network. But these dialogues are important because hopefully they lead to solutions. And we're working with all of our partners in our African American Quality of Life Initiative, which was funded by the Lilly Endowment to the tune of $100 million. And we're going to be partnering with everyone in this room and across the country to ensure African Americans get the solutions and the supports that they need to move forward. So I thank you all for being here today, and I thank you for allowing me to be a part of this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mason. Now to our distinguished panel. Panelists, I will introduce you to our audience before we bring up our moderator. So please wave your hand for the camera and the production crew as I introduce you. Our first panelist, Dr. Virginia Caine, Director, Marion County Public Health Department. Dr. Caine is a medical school graduate of the State University of New York as well as the ID Fellowship Program, University of Washington in Seattle. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Virginia Caine. Next, we have my good man, Judge David Certo, Marion County Superior Court in Indiana. Judge Certo was appointed by Governor Mitch Daniels in August 2007 and elected to a full term in 2008. He received a BA in Government and Theology from the University of Notre Dame and a Juris Doctorate from Indiana University McKinney Law School. Please join me in welcoming Judge David Certo. Next, we have a Marine. Once a Marine, always a Marine. Senior Chaplain Jim Bontrager, Elkhart Police Department. He is also the founder of Warrior on Wall Ministries. As a United States Marine, Jim understands warriors. He speaks at law enforcement conferences, retreats, and conducts law enforcement chaplain training around the country. Jim holds his Master of Chaplain credentials with the International Conference of Police Chaplains. Please join me in welcoming Chaplain Jim Bontrager. And our final panelist is Marion County Prosecutor Ryan Mears. Ryan attended St. Joseph's College and attained his law degree from the Indiana University Robert H. McKinney School of Law. After law school, Ryan immediately began his career in public service at the Marion County Prosecutor's Office. As Chief Trial Deputy in the Prosecutor's Office, Ryan has championed reform and set new expectations for the criminal justice system in Marion County. He coordinated the July 2019 Second Chance workshops, bringing together prosecutor's office staff, nonprofit organizations, and pro bono attorneys to serve individuals interested in expungement and reinstatement of suspended driver's licensing. Please join me in welcoming Marion County Prosecutor Ryan Mears. Really want to sincerely thank you all for being here today to share your voice and your expertise. Now I get the distinct honor to introduce our moderator for today. He started his civil rights career as a youth coordinator for Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who inspired him to work in the civil rights movement his entire life. A social justice activist of more than 60 years, his experience has given him an appeal to people from all walks of life. He earned his Master of Divinity degree from Duke University while serving an unjust 34-year prison term as a member of the Wilmington 10, who Amnesty International declared political prisoners. The Wilmington 10 case garnered international attention and was pardoned 40 years later. He also received a Doctor of Ministry degree from Howard University. In 1980, he became a vice president of the National Council of Churches. He was the national director of the Million Man March and is currently president and CEO of the National Newspaper Publishers Association. Dr. Chavis has begun hosting his weekly Black-oriented public affairs talk show on PBS. So if you haven't got an opportunity to check it out, check it out. The Chavis Chronicles is a very rare programming, and there are currently no weekly talk shows on network television specifically from a Black perspective. If you're truly interested in learning some truth, I encourage you to tune in. Joining us from the nation's capital, please join me in giving him his proper respects. Let's please welcome civil rights icon, Dr. Benjamin Chavis, Jr.
Good morning. Good morning. This is another day that the Lord has made, and we are so thankful to be in Indianapolis. We're thankful to have all of you who are present, but we're also thankful for the thousands. I was just getting texts from Los Angeles, people up early on the West Coast, on the East Coast, who are watching this program via the internet. We thank the Horizontal Foundation, AP. Aaron, thank you again for bring me back to the great city of Indianapolis. Attorney General Hill, thank you for your leadership in the state and making possible this program. To the head of the NAACP, I'm always glad to be in the presence of the NAACP and the Urban League, and to everyone that's in the audience. but I'm honored to be on the stage with this distinguished panel. Mental health, beyond the stigma. I think the panel is so versed in this subject, we're going to get right into it. I always like to tell a story that's relevant to the subject matter. In my career in the civil rights movement, Attorney General, for sometimes you do visit jails. And I really appreciate the prayer that Dr. Posey gave earlier about the presence of God. And the poem, Brother Branch, I mean, man, you really, HB, touched all of us, not with only the poetic excellence of your words, but the depth of passion and feeling that comes from how you associated those words in your poem. We're all blessed for your poetry. And to all of the brothers and sisters in the audience, look, I'm talking about the internet audience now. This is a subject matter. Don't flip that channel. Stay on this channel for the next hour and a half because this is so important. And also we're going to hear from our nation's highest medical officer, the Surgeon General, Dr. Adams, will be with us. What I was about to share with the panel is that when I received that 34-year sentence that Brother Ron in the introduction referred to, I was 24 years old. I knew it was unjust. So in Central Prison, before they process you, we're part of the processing, they give you a psychiatric test. It's an oral exam by the psychiatrist or psychologist, and also you take a written test. So I took the written test, did pretty good on it, they said. And then they said they needed to ask me a serious question. I said, well, sure. And the first question was, what did you dream about last night? And I said, escaping. And the psychiatrist, who was, the reason why I'm telling this story is sometimes in life, it's not only the mental health of our person, of our individual, it's also the mental health of the family, mental health of the community, mental health of the nation. But I also want to talk about the mental health of the system. Our systems have to be aware that they're dealing with human beings and all of the diversity and all of the differentiation that every human being may have as a creature of God Almighty. And I think that this is such a subject, Attorney General Hill, that we need to continue to have this discussion on mental health. The mental health of all of us, the mental health of our community. And I think that if we can see each other as brothers and sisters, if we can see each other as part of one human family, I think that we can always strive to make sure that everybody has equal justice, fairness, and treated fairly. We've just come through a very divisive election in our nation. And some would pose, how can we bridge this divide? I think one of the genius things about these bridge forums is that it gives an opportunity to not only discuss about having a bridge on these issues, law enforcement, mental health, social justice, racial justice, all equally important. Not one is more important than all. They're all important. But one that we don't talk about enough, we all agree, is mental health. And that's why this panel is so important. And we thank you all very much. So I'm going to get right into the questions that have been researched and the questions that have been prepared. And Dr. Caine, I'm going to start with you. How can police departments be more proactive to protect officer mental health as well as the mental health of those they come in contact with?
So first, let me just say that I'm just so honored to be in your presence as such a legendary advocate for things that are so critical in this community, and also thank Attorney General Curtis Hill for having these seminars in partnership with our Arizona folks, because one of the things we found out in Marion County, that mental health, when we do our community health assessment every 4 years, mental health was the #1 public health issue in this community, #1. So I think the thing is, with the poverty that's happening, we see this coronavirus pandemic that's providing more increased anxiety. And for our officers, when we see the amount of post-traumatic stress disorder, as much as 15 to 25% occurring in our officers, you know, when you have to kill someone, the stress related to that, or you see someone you know, another police officer that's killed, or you may be experiencing a lot of just misery and abuse when you see a child undergoing sexual abuse, or maybe an adult going through physical abuse, or a senior. Over time, that takes a lot of stress for you. So we need to have law enforcement training being done on an annual basis to help our law enforcement. We also need to partner with mental health institutions, so that if that frantic mom who has a child or son or daughter is out of control and they're out in the community and they know that unless they can reach that individual, their son may die. But we don't always have that expertise among our law enforcement. So if you don't have that expertise or training, you need to partner with someone, once you identify that call, to be able to handle a person that has a mental health issue. And so that training needs to be done on a constant basis. And you have to learn, and some kind of assessment on a chronic basis, on an annual basis, because when you have so much burnout with our law enforcement, the decision-making may be totally different than if you didn't have post-traumatic stress or you didn't have chronic burnout. You may respond to an event that's totally different. So constant training is so important. Training on implicit bias is so important, and training to understand the actions of our individuals who may be at really high risk for being involved in a life-threatening situation.
Yes, thank you very much. Just a follow-up. You know, there's a national debate about standards. Is it your opinion that we should have standard training, particularly on the mental health question, for all law enforcement, no matter what their rank?
So definitely, I think training is so critical, and it should be standardized in local communities. But more important than that, the community needs to understand and know what training is being done by law enforcement. So they don't want to be facing a situation and they don't know how that law enforcement is going to respond. So it's just as critical for us and the public to know what type of training our law enforcement individuals have. And we need to track those individuals who, for whatever reason, can't comprehend their training. They may need to be placed someplace else as opposed to being out there in the public.
Thank you very much. I want to turn to Judge Certo from the Marion County Superior Court. Law enforcement has become the sort of the default provider for mental health services in many communities. What does a typical day, from your perspective, Judge, look like when law enforcement is challenged with these mental health issues?
Thank you, Dr. Chavis. I'm very grateful to talk about the experience that we see in court, because I work in a low-level misdemeanor and felony court. And very often, what we experience is a crisis of imagination. People don't know they can have better than they have because they're used to relationships characterized by transience and violence, and that's not normal. So as a community, I'm grateful we're having this conversation about how we set people up for success, because what we often see in court is the same errors again and again, and then compounded until they get worse and end up in death or prison, which is usual path for things like addiction or cycles of violence. For a usual day in court, we'll talk with people about how to get at those underlying causes. What we know from our experience, the evidence tells us, is the best predictor of somebody staying out of trouble is criminal history. The second best, though, is having a job. It's meaningful employment. So to the extent that we can give people a mission for getting out of bed in the morning, something that gives them dignity and puts money in their pockets, take care of their families, all those things are critically important. But we also can set people up for success by creating systems that point in one direction or another based on what the evidence tells us. I'm very grateful that with our criminal justice partners, our new jail that we're building here in this community has a front door called the Assessment and Intervention Center. And when we talk about taking people to the jail, we're going to ask the question, what problem are we here to solve? And if it's a crisis of mental illness or mental health, if it's someone who's having a terrible day and ends up in conflict with police officers who might also be having a terrible day, we can figure out better outcomes than just using the jail. Jail's easy. In many ways, jail's dumb because it doesn't get at many of the underlying issues, especially for people who frequently have mental health crisis. You might not know it until the police are called. And if somebody's in one of our downtown hotels having a mental health crisis, the police are going to be called. So very often that interaction both is a danger in the community to that individual who's calling or the individual who's in crisis, but also to our police officers. But that's why the National Alliance on Mental Illness talks about training for the crisis intervention, where an officer understands how to recognize the crisis and then work to diffuse it. And I think that training that Dr. Caine was talking about is so important because it sets the officer up for success too, but gives the officer more tools when coming to a crisis about how to reduce it. In Indianapolis, we've also pioneered this MCAT program where we send a medic and a police officer out together to calls that might involve mental illness. And that makes the citizen safer, but also the officer safer. And the pilot program says that fewer than 2% of those interactions resulted in arrest. That's using our law enforcement resources smarter, but also setting, again, our officers up for success because they're trained to do some things very well, but provide mental health treatment services is unfortunately not one of them. So getting that engagement, that opening the front door for access to services for people, frankly, whose families or communities might tell them that's not normal, is a great advantage, in my opinion.
Is that unique to Indianapolis? Because
it's
in a
pioneering.
lot of cities, unfortunately, that doesn't happen.
Yes, sir. There are very few communities that have taken those steps. Indianapolis is one of the national leaders, I'm happy to tell you, with Dr. Caine and, of course, Eskenazi Community Mental Health helping with those things. But we're demonstrating that we can use limited resources in a better way
Yes.
to help promote better outcomes.
Dr. Caine?
Yeah,
Yes.
so I wanted to comment on this. When you want to really look at what's one of the major etiologies for what's happening, do you know for African Americans, 8 out of the 10 lowest paying jobs are done by African Americans or Latinos? Let me say this. 8 out of 10 lowest paying jobs are taken up by African Americans and Hispanics. Now, you can have a job, but most of our jobs are related to minimum wage. Minimum wage. They're not making the living wage. We've been on $7.25 for the minimum wage for over 20 years. And so half the time, they have to have 2 jobs to even make it, and the stress and the anxiety. If we could just get to living wage, what does that mean? I have enough money to pay my rent, put my food on the table, and can pay for utilities. But at $7, $10, you're not making it. So you can have a job, but it's not a job of substance in order for poverty to keep our folks out of trouble. So, Judge, I just think we got to work on Attorney General Hill in the community. I think we have to work on getting that living wage that'll make, I believe, a huge difference in having to stop the robberies, because there's no food in the house, and they're concerned about that. And so there are a lot of honest, hardworking people, but with inflation, and we've done nothing for 20 years to catch up with inflation, we're still going to have a lot of persistent problems. But I do want to compliment Ashkenazi Health and the partnership with the City of Indianapolis Public Safety Department to have teams of counselors. These are people who've been trained in behavioral health to go with those police officers when they have a situation that is life-threatening.
If we'd have had that in Philadelphia a week or so ago, a person would probably still be alive. So, Attorney General Hill, I know you're not on the panel, but I just want to say that these best practices, if you could share that with these other attorney generals across the United States, one of the problems that we're facing across the country, every state or every city is doing it so differently. There's no standard method of operation when it comes to this question of mental health. After you get past the denial, after you get past the stigma, how it's handled is so many different ways. And unfortunately, in many of our communities, it can lead to a fatal interaction. There should not have been a fatal interaction because mental health is the overriding situation. So this takes me to Chaplain Bontrager. As the senior chaplain at the Elkhart Police Department, I know you have to deal with a lot of things, man, as chaplain. But from your perspective, how is the issue of suicide among law enforcement handled or prevented better?
Well, it's prevented better by a number of things. I think, first of all, we have to really get a grip on what's causing it. You know, it breaks my heart to just see the public and their lack of understanding and our inability in law enforcement to communicate it. But a law enforcement world is totally different than everyone else's world. I started out as a rookie. I want to have a good time. I'm in this because I care about people. But then I'm being dispatched to calls where I have no one there who will be honest about why I'm there. So I begin to assume that everyone there is a liar until I can ferret out who's telling me the truth. You take that over a 20, 30-year career, and it's easy to see how they become cynical and distrust others. We talk about serving and protecting, but what happens with law enforcement's greatest frustration is leadership. Internal leadership in departments where we don't have leaders who have leadership skills that serve and protect those who are supposed to serve and protect. We start looking at just the physiological things that are happening. When you talk about hypervigilance, given the fact that any given moment things can go south, I happen to be in a heightened state of awareness as a cop because I never know when it's going to be fight or flight, and it won't be flight, so it'll be fight. Because that I'm getting abnormal levels of adrenaline dumped on me, cortisol, glucose, and if those are not burned off, then suddenly it starts to eat away at my life. You take the reactive nature of law enforcement, dispatched to calls, held over for reports, called in for training, called out for specialty units, subpoenaed to court. Well, you build a reactionary nature rather than a proactive nature to address mental health, family issues, everything else. We talk about stress and unhealthy coping mechanisms. Alcohol be that a substance of choice. 90% of all law enforcement suicides have alcohol base. You can take about family issues and control, where they teach me to be controlling the situation, and I go home and try that on my significant other, or my wife or husband, significant other, and next thing you know, it doesn't go well. We can talk about horrible things, and I apologize in advance to the audience, but I'm trying to faithfully communicate why we're here and what we're struggling with in law enforcement. The other day, we have a fatality, and you have to tell a rookie police officer, be careful, you're going to step in some brain matter. What other profession has to do that? What other profession has to do that and go then to a barking dog call because somebody's complaining, and you're wondering why the officer has some kind of bad attitude? We take fatigue. 53% of all cops get less than 6.5 hours of sleep. I can show you study after study. We can take the social media climate. So we have to do something about this. We have to get a good grasp of what we're dealing with, number one. Number two, we have to be proactive rather than reactive. Right. And so that goes back and gets spouses, significant others involved. We do a number of innovative trainings in our department where we help those that they'll be honest with in mental health, their loved ones, to better understand what they're up against. And then you bring a chaplain element in there, a trained professional chaplain who's an asset. And then we look at a peer support element where peers are there. And then we look at mental health professionals. And we make a broad spectrum where one size doesn't fit all, where we can sit there and give officers those that they can trust so they can reach out to and be encouraged in the way they need to be encouraged.
Thank you. You said more than a mouthful. And I hope the audience is listening. Yeah, Dr. Caine,
And do you
why
know
don't explain?
that you have a lot of physiological impact here? Do you know if all that stress, the destructive stress, a lot of hormones that you see, it causes heart disease. They get hypertension, they get high blood pressure. They get chronic fatigue. They have insomnia. A lot of times, whatever hours that they have, they can't even sleep. And so it's a constant feeling of tension, emotionally, tension. And a lot of times, some of them are in cars by themselves, so they have this high level of social isolation during the day when they're out there in the community, which is really, really tough. And then, like you say, you may go home to family members who don't quite have an understanding what you're going through during the day, so they may not get the type of support that they need, and then concern about how the community perceives them, which is really huge. So we have to figure out how to bridge that gap between law enforcement and the individuals in the community. But that requires communication, and it requires the community to know their police officers as well.
The good news is, Doctor, the training for police officers is getting better all the time. And especially this crisis intervention training is hugely helpful. It's easily transferable. You talked about how divided the country was over the election. Crisis intervention training is great for Thanksgiving dinner, right? To be able to talk about things in a civil way, de-escalate when things go wrong. We also have better tools than we used to have. I was the president of the Citizen Police Complaint Board here in Indianapolis when we introduced tasers. And all of a sudden, people who were misbehaving knew that they weren't just going to get to fight a police officer who might have a nightstick anymore. There's a taser. And what a gift that was to people who no longer would get hit in the head with nightsticks, and officers wouldn't have to fight them because word got around nobody wanted to be tased. That kind of tool was a game changer in a lot of ways on our streets for citizens and police officers. So that really helps, but training is essential with those tools.
Very good. Prosecutor Myers. Is it Mears?
Mears, yes.
Mears, Prosecutor Mears. Thank you so much. I think your presence here is very important. Prosecutors, you get to make the decision on not only what is charged, but who is charged and how they're charged. But what I want to ask you is something about that I learned from the Civil Rights Movement. Dr. King used to tell us, be careful with what we say we want. Make sure we use language that doesn't fulfill the stereotype. 2020 has seen the call for, quote unquote, defund the police. Probably misunderstood by a lot of quarters. And of course, the outcry for Black Lives Matter, the point, counterpoint, the defensiveness versus being proactive versus reactive. I think that what we should have been discussing is how to fund what was just been discussed here. It needs to be funded. But if you have the prerequisite that we're just going to take the money away from the police and not say where the money is going to go to help these critical problems that we're facing, then it's what Dr. King used to warn us about, using language that will come back, will boomerang on you. So I'm asking you as a county prosecutor, how have you perceived, what is your perception that law enforcement, the trauma that law enforcement has received by even hearing the term defund the police?
Well, defunding the police is not a solution to this problem, and it's a bad idea. And I think it's important at night, if something happens, that there is someone to call, and that you have the ability to call 911 and the police are able to respond. I think the better question is, what tools do we want to give those police officers when they respond to that call at night? Unfortunately, in Marion County, a large number of our runs are mental health related runs. And so it goes back to that idea of how do we want to allocate resources in a way that provides police officers with all the tools they need to be successful. And I think where the conversation is important is, what training do we give police officers, but then also what tools do we give police officers when they arrive on the scene? Is it having a mental health clinician come with them? Is it having a social worker with them to help address some of the issues and the problems that they face? And so I think that's a better conversation to have. But we need the police department. We need a great police department that's well trained. But they also need to have access to the tools and the resources that they need to serve the community. And unfortunately, mental health issues are a tremendous problem in this community specifically. So what can we do to get the police those resources so that we can get them out to the community and out to people? So when people are calling saying, hey, I need help, we're giving the people what they need.
So in order to, I understand completely and agree with what you're saying, but put what you just said in the context of the outcry to not give more resources to the police department, not give more resources to these kind of programs that have been described as being effective or best practices, but in fact to take away the funding. Can you share with us what from the police officers you've talked to, those are decision makers of how resources are allocated, how is that theme, defund the police, impacted the psyche of law enforcement?
Well, I think it does have an impact on the police because it creates a message or sends a message sometimes to law enforcement, maybe that the service that they're providing doesn't have value, or that we don't place value or importance on what they're doing and what they're bringing to the community. And so I really like what you said in terms about how we phrase that conversation or about what's the best way to discuss those resources, I think is important because we need the police now more than ever, but we need to make sure that we're giving them the tools they need.
Right, again, yes, Chaplain.
Well, and I think, you know, if we just think about this, we have to logically think about, you know, where are we targeting the resources? You know, sometimes we talk in terms of blanket statements. The question gets to be, are we going to be better served in our community by taking away financing the law enforcement, putting fewer police officers? In the state of Indiana, of my understanding, we have 24 hours of state-mandated training a year. Of that, 6 hours are psychomotor skills, that is, dealing with defensive tactics, firearms training, you know, emergency vehicle operations. And so then we start looking at the limited amount of time that we have in training to start with, and then we reduce manpower to the point where we're going to minimize training even more, and then we look at our target frustrations of the way they interact with the community or else they do things in a physical sense. We need more money targeted towards intermediate interventions rather than going from nothing all the way to deadly force situations, and better targeting to help give them the tools to deal with what they have to deal with.
Right. I'm a strong supporter of the Black Lives Matter movement, and I have these discussions with our brothers in the community all the time. Because I think we do need to make demands, we do need to amplify our voices, but I also believe that we have to have these kind of discussions like we're having now. Because sometimes I think we miss each other. I guarantee you, if the leaders of the Black Lives Matter movement in Indiana were here this morning to hear what you just said about how to get more of the right resources to the right place to prevent tragedies. To me, the way you fulfill lives being mattering is to help protect them, to save them, so lives are not lost. And unfortunately, sometimes when it comes to coming up with a solution to the problem, if the problem is not stated right, then you're going to get a solution that's not going to work because people are not understanding what the problem is. So Dr. Caine, I'm going to come back to you anyway, because to me, the design of programs, the design of how resources, we need more fact-based solutions rather than some of the things that are out there right now where people are sort of chasing after imaginations rather than dealing with something that can really help people, both in law enforcement as well as in the community.
But you know what? There are two things. Let me just say, I know you won't believe this.
No, go ahead.
But I've been stopped once by law enforcement. And so, you know, I was trying to explain to the officer about, you know, I was trying to find out why were they stopping me, because I just left a stoplight, so I wasn't going fast. I think I was going 25 miles per hour. And I didn't get a reply from that law enforcement. And so it was clear that I needed to shut up and just be patient and wait till he wanted to tell me what was going on. But he also made me get out of the car and stand in front of my car, you know, facing the car. And I'm saying, wow, I'm on my way to do a videotaping with the, at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. I thought I looked really clean. You know, I had my best suit on, practically new, nice trench coat, and I thought I looked, you know, respectable and whatever. And so he finally told me after a little while, he says, "You're in a stolen car." And I said, "Oh my goodness, I can explain this, you know, if you just allow me to just reach into my car. I've got paperwork to show you that this is my car. And I just picked it up this morning." But he got angry with me and stated that you should have cleaned this report off of the law enforcement's database software system. And literally, I just picked up the car less than an hour, and as though I've got control of clearing off a law enforcement's software data system. And nothing personal, but I wondered if it would have been different, and the response would have been different if I was a white male in a suit looking clean versus a black female in a suit looking clean. I just, you know, as a black person all your life, you just wonder about that. But I did get robbed in another situation from my house, and I was so grateful to call the police to get over there, and they got over there fast. And I say, how can we reduce funding for law enforcement? Who's going to protect us?
Right.
So, but I do think we do need communication in the public too, so that when we are stopped, do we know what the process is, what we're supposed to say, so we don't say something inadvertent that may heighten the tension in that situation.
Well, that's the benefit of having these bridge forums. Obviously, we're not going to resolve these issues if we don't involve both the community and law enforcement, the professionals who know what should work and how it should work. And I think we need to have these discussions in our churches. We need to have these discussions in our organizations, in our social organizations.
And I think we need law enforcement to come in there and tell us, have us have an opportunity to talk with them and say, when you get stopped, what should you do?
Right. Well, that's, again, part of the challenges that we have is that because we live in a society where divisiveness appears to be the normality, and well, these bridge forums appear to be abnormal because a lot of cities don't have them. And that's why we are going around the country on a sort of this tour. But I've heard some things this morning I think that the community at large needs to be made more aware of. And vice versa, I'm sure that there's some things that law enforcement need to hear from the community that law enforcement may not be aware of. I think it's in our mutual interest to get a better handle, a better way to resolve these issues proactively and not just react to a tragedy after it happens. So, you know, Judge, how do you feel?
Dr. Chavis, most citizens don't know either that you can go on a ride along with a police officer just by asking. And that's really a powerful way to learn why police officers do what they do. If a police officer walks up to your car in a traffic stop with his hand on his gun, it's because one of the leading times when a police officer dies in the line of duty is a routine traffic stop. And most people don't know about that, but especially at the police academy, when we go as citizens to learn more about their practices, we'd get in a police cruiser at night and practice stopping a car, and then we'd switch vehicles and practice being stopped. And I don't always drive with my hands at 10 and 2 in a car, but I sure do if I'm stopping and it wasn't my idea, because that way the officer knows he or she is safe, And I know I'm more likely to be safe, but we're not having even those basic conversations often enough. And in my opinion, I think the more educated people are about why police officers do what they do or how they're trained, the more likely those interactions will be characterized with good outcomes. To reduce that friction between citizens and public servants is hugely important, so officers aren't afraid all the time or nervous or reaching for that danger tool. And so citizens don't have to wonder or worry about those things either. But especially for officers to be more engaged with citizens, to get to know them, whether on a beat or shop with a cop programs, the police athletic league. There are lots of ways the police reach out into the community. But citizens, we have an opportunity and an obligation to reach out to the police as well and invite them to our neighborhood meetings, to our civic organizations, and to give them a chance to come out and talk about the training they get about when and how force might be indicated and what level is appropriate. Because as citizens, we have to be involved in those conversations too. But we have to do it in an orderly way, because if we're trying to resolve these issues on the street at 2 in the morning, we're already in a dangerous spot, in my opinion.
Yes.
I think you should ask Reverend Mears, Prosecutor Mears about, he has these community meetings on once a month, and I've had the opportunity of attending his community meetings. So, you know, we want to know how you make a decision if you just rob a loaf of bread, but what is the sentencing like? So is the sentencing the same as our white collar events? And so having that ability to do those kind of dialogues, I think is really critical with the community. But we just
Right.
need...
I see Sister Ratcliffe had her hand up. Yes.
The National NAACP has the 411 on the 50, but we have been working with law enforcement as well as the FOP and trying to get out to the community as a partnership for people to understand once they're stopped, how to conduct themselves as a police officer.
Right.
And doing that with law enforcement, we felt that would be a better way to try to kind of engage the community if we do it as a team. So we have been working on that last year, but that is something that people need to know, because a lot of people have no idea. There's close to 100 different reasons why you can be stopped. Tail light out, broken light, a lot of different things people don't understand. So they panic once they are stopped. So there is information out there which I can get you all. It comes in a pamphlet, and it's the 411 on the 50, and you also have the ACLU and other organizations that have that information.
Right. I'm going to repeat it because we're internet, and they may not have picked up your question. What Sister Ratcliffe is saying for the audience on the internet is that the NAACP has a national program to inform people in the community how to respond when they're stopped by the police, particularly vehicles, when you're stopped, so there's not an overreaction that would lead to an overreaction. And you can contact the NAACP for that information. But Chaplain, I'm going to go back to you on this point, and it's so important because sometimes things also get misidentified. I want to make sure that we're clear that when we talk about mental health, we're not just talking about mental health of one racial group. We're talking about mental health of all racial groups. Mental health is something that every community needs. But there are some social determinatives to mental health that Dr. Caine referred to, and one of them is economic. One of them is poverty. But yet, what normally does not get discussed in America, there are more white people in poverty than black people. But that doesn't get discussed. It's as if that racial and ethnic people are the poor people. So, Chaplain, how do you deal with the issue of race that impinges on the issues of the stigma of mental health as well as in law enforcement?
Well, I think it comes down with vision, We all know there's an adage that says without a vision the people perish. What's the promised land look like? Before I can determine where I'm trying to go, I look at it for me, what is mental health? What is someone who has good mental health? What is someone who is, and I look back to the golden rule, and I look back and I say, the highest ideal that we should have as a community is to love each other more than ourselves. And if we realize that's a standard we're aspiring toward number one, law enforcement officers loving the communities they serve. I use the word warrior, and I know there's a lot of back and forth in that, but I use G.K. Chesterton's definition, which I love. The true warrior fights not because he hates what's in front of him, because he loves what's behind him. I think one of the most honorable things to do is, in the name of love for my community, in the name of love for the cause, to go out there in harm's way, to do what I can to build up, to strengthen, to encourage, and unfortunately, you have to do what I have to do in situation is what a whole officer looks like. And I think what we're talking about to a young lady right here, just this idea of understanding each other better. What kind of community do we want to have? And what are the tools needed to get us there? And then have an honest dialogue about expectations and police process and community concerns. And then through that, distill things to the point where we can have a mutual agreement on what we want for a future.
Right. Does Indiana or Indianapolis, do they have a resident requirement that the police have to live in the communities in which they serve?
No.
Okay. Well, one of the issues is perception. You know, I think certainly out of love, to use your point, that people are called to service, people are take an oath. But in many communities, that oath and that perception why people become police officers in the first place is not well understood. I think we need more diversity and inclusion in the ranks of the police department. That will help, because that means people will live in the community in which they police. But also I think that we have to change perceptions. In other panels, we've talked about community policing, but that's a kind of a loaded term, because depending on who you talk to, you have a different definition about what kind of community policing works. Prosecutor Mears, how do you see it from your office in terms of your office interacts with law enforcement because that's their statutory job, but on the pendulum, do you see the pendulum swinging in the right direction, or is it going in the wrong direction on the issue of law enforcement, mental health, the varying perceptions of the different communities, racial communities, social, economic communities that police officers have to serve?
Well, I think the positive and the encouraging thing is I think everybody recognizes room for improvement, and both sides need to do a better job of recognizing the challenges that everybody's facing. We talk about the trauma and the PTSD that police officers experience, but unfortunately there's a lot of people in our community who have experienced similar levels of violence and have seen really terrible things at really young ages that have impacted how they feel about the world and how they feel about law enforcement. And so understanding where both sides are coming from, I think is critically important. But as someone who's in government, as someone who is, frequently works with the police, I think us in government, we need to have the mindset of the community doesn't serve the police, the community doesn't serve the prosecutor's office, we serve the community. It's on us to have that conversation and to have that dialogue. That responsibility is on us to make sure that people better understand where we're coming from and why we're doing the things that we're doing. Mental health is a tremendous challenge in law enforcement, but that's on us to explain that to the community. It's not the community's job to try to understand where we're coming from. And I think that's something that's critically important moving forward. Is it's our job to reach out to the community, listen, and have that conversation.
Very good. Yes, Chaplain.
Well, just my experience on unfortunately we went through the whole Ferguson era and
yes,
in an effort as a chaplain to try to, have meaningful discussions with those that are concerned about police process and things like that. I think we have to do two things. I agree with the prosecutor. Number one, it's very important for police leaders to explain police process. At the end of the day, we work for the community, and so we need to be better communicators. But the second thing is we need those who are willing to at least listen. And it reminds me of a marriage. I deal with relationships as a chaplain, and active listening skills to show value to those who are involved in the discussion are imperative. I need to hear what you're saying, mirror it back so we know we're communicating, and then we can sit there and start to get somewhere, I think.
Right. I think, again, what Dr. Caine said about listening, I think it's a two-way street. I think that obviously the officer has to protect the officer's self when they stop somebody. I understand that. But I guarantee you, in most of our communities, there's such fear of being stopped for whatever reason. I mean, the lights, you know, oh my God, am I going to live through this? And I think that it's almost like a setup. It sets up the perception that there's going to be a confrontation, rather than the officers really pulling me over because there's something wrong with the car, the officer's going to try to help me. Unfortunately, that is not the perception. So we really got to work on our messaging, and I would say do it in a proactive way. I think the messaging doesn't get home in the aftermath of a tragedy because everything is so polarized. People are not going to give weight to what is articulated. I've seen many chiefs of police after a tragedy try to have to explain what happened, even before the investigation of what happened. And it's a tough situation. But I think we've had enough of these cases now across the United States and probably here in Indianapolis as well, that we should, both law enforcement and the community, be further across that bridge to bridge the communities together. That's the issue, Dr. Caine.
So I think one of the most important and most influential institutions in our, especially our Black communities and our Latino communities, are our faith-based organizations.
Right.
They are the best communicators. They have more influence on the people who attend their churches, but well respected in the community. We need them to continue. They've been out there, but we need to continue to have their support in helping to bridge this gap of communication. And our organizations like NAACP, who has been a strong advocate and fighter for the rights and trying to do an effective job. You know, we have young sons that we worry about being stopped, okay? In Urban League, which provides a lot of resources, services out there, whether it's food, clothing items, helping the homeless. We've got to get us all together and continue to have widespread dialogue, but we do need to do it with our own law enforcement, our prosecutors, our chaplains, so we can all
Yes.
have just...
Well, we have some of our faith leaders in the audience. Do we have a microphone, or do you have to come up? Dr. Posey, if you want to just address this, but I want you to come forward because we want to tape you. Your words are so always on point. I want to make sure we document it. And as Dr. Posey comes, Dr. Caine, I'm going to ask you about the talk issue.
Thank you, Dr. Chavis. And to the panel, this is a very prescient discussion. The gems and nuggets being dropped. The problem is there's so much to be discussed that we can't finish any one subject. But I was sitting there in my seat, and the thing that caught my attention, Dr. Caine immediately came with, and that is the role of the church, the faith-based community, in bridging the gap, and indeed it is a gap, relative to mental health. It is the perception, I can say as a tenured pastor of over 32 years, it is the perception in the African American community that an encounter with the police at any level is not simply an encounter, it is a confrontation. And that there is this, that the police are approaching this stop with an implicit bias that you are a criminal and that your job is simply to acquiesce to what we say, and we're not concerned about your opinions or your explanations. That is the result, truly, and it may sound cliche, but in my doctoral work, that is we talked about this, that is the reality of a master narrative of 400 years that says, my skin has criminalized me. And so programs are great. In my view, defunding the police shouldn't even be discussed. The City County Council in Indianapolis just not only funded a new budget for the IMPD in Indianapolis, they received an increase for programs under the leadership of President Bob Osley and Leroy Robinson. So I don't believe that's even something that should be discussed, in my opinion. But this underlying post-traumatic slave disorder is a reality in interactions with police relative to the African American and brown-skinned people. Now, there's one other thing that was said is very important that needs to be discussed today. Judge Certo, yes. Certo, I'm sorry, mentioned that most police action deaths happen at traffic stops. The problem is, so do African American deaths relative to black men. It's at a traffic stop. The harsh reality is that African American males don't expect to leave an encounter at a traffic stop with a police officer unscathed. That should not be the case. I'm a black man with 2 doctoral degrees, and when I am stopped by the police, most often I do not get a ticket. So why was I stopped? I have to assume there is another reason if I wasn't breaking the law. And I've been let go. But the issue is, why was I stopped? I've been stopped for reasons as much as I wanted to see who you were. Whose car is this? Do you live in this neighborhood? Where are you coming from? One night, and I'm gonna go to my seat after I say this, my wife and I were leaving the show. It was about 10 o'clock, we were leaving the show, and a police officer stopped me, and my hands were on the steering wheel. I said, what can I do for you, officer? He said, where are you going? I said, why would I have to answer that question? He said, why are you out this late? I said, I'm 54 years old, I don't have a curfew. Why are you asking me questions about was I speeding? He said, have a good day. Now that experience, whether people will admit it or not, is not an uncommon experience for African Americans. And that's what we bring to an encounter. And so as it was so eloquently said, it is the job of those in authority to express how they intend to employ their authority to those who are ignorant of how authority should function. No person at a stop knows criminology, but the officer does. And it is in his or her best interest to present kindness with authority for everyone involved. Thank you, Dr. Chavis.
Thank you, Dr. Posey. Dr. Caine, the talk is something that parents have to increasingly have with not just teenagers, but young adults, millennials. And in some cases, I've been in some school systems where I've talked to a lot of parent-teacher situations where the talk is even held with kids under 10 years old. From your background as a professional in this mental health area, how can we help law enforcement know that blacks and Latinos almost out of necessity to protect their loved ones have to have the quote unquote the talk in a family setting about law enforcement?
I think this may be one of the most critical areas, I think, for understanding. But I also want to emphasize something too when they're having that message with their sons or even their daughters. They have to have it early, and when you're young, you don't understand why you are treated maybe differently than you perceive your white counterparts. And sometimes some of our teenagers or our young adults, I don't know that I want to say it's arrogance because they know who they are and they know what their rights are, but sometimes that response comes off as that you're being uncooperative with law enforcement, and it can get you into to trouble. But you have to have that discussion, unfortunately, in the Black community, possibly the Latino community, because it's going to lead specifically with less altercations. I'm going to tell you something else, all right? I'm just going to put it out here. Sometimes it's about the messenger when you're talking to the Black community. Our Black community needs to see that we have Black officers that can come out to them and talk, because they live in these neighborhoods. They go to church and whatever, but I think we don't always see enough of people of color outreaching us about this discussion. And this means that, wow, I think you will have a better understanding of what I've gone through growing up, okay? I went to a gas station just last week, and I went to get some, the sparkling water. But I want to say within 5 or 10 minutes, I knew someone was going to come around that counter because she couldn't see me, trying to determine whether I'm stealing anything or not. And I said, wow, I wonder how long it's going to take. It took less than 5 minutes for someone around the corner trying to determine whether I'm going to steal something in the store. And I do know there's a lot of robbery in a lot of these locations that are inner city areas. But if you can think about, this is an experience you've had all of your life, and it hasn't stopped. So it's just like you've got constant eyes and a constant surveillance on you. So how do you explain that to your young son or your young daughter, that this is just part of your life, but I need to protect you? But we have to have that cross dialogue. And whether it's a town meeting or whatever, we have to continue to have this education so that both sides can understand from a social determinant standpoint what is happening in our lives. So what am I saying? You can't, it's not enough to be culturally sensitive. You have to now, it's a higher standard, you have to be culturally competent. What did I say? You're aware about the problem, but you're not competent enough to address the problem. So this is all about training, implicit bias training, training on behalf of the community, how they should interact and communicate if they're stopped, what the expectations are. And we have to do, we just really in this time and era, we have to do more. But I still want to say we've got to address those social determinants of health, whether it's housing, food, deserts. Because, hey, if I'm hungry, I'm going to be way more angry and more irritable. And I may not respond because I'm just, my frustration and my anger, I'm depressed with them because I don't know whether I'm going to be put out of my apartment. And then just the fear. And it is fear that is well-grounded related to this coronavirus is added onto our burden, that we're in a very dangerous period right now until we can know that we've curtailed this coronavirus. So when you're a law officer and you're going out to interact with somebody, is this person maybe infected? You know, I may have to learn better infection controls, that I'm dealing with individuals out there that I may have to arrest. So a lot of concerns related to that in that fashion too. But we have to do the talk.
Thank you. I'm looking at the time clock. We have a few minutes left. I want to start with Prosecutor Mears, and I'm going to ask each of you this simple question. Based on all of what you know and all of what you have experienced, what is the single most thing you would recommend to improve getting over the stigma of mental health from a law enforcement perspective or community perspective or both? But what is the single most thing that you would recommend, Prosecutor Mears, to overcome the stigma of mental health?
Trust. I think there needs to be trust that we're all going to address the root causes and the challenges that create some of these mental health issues, and that we're going to trust one another to adequately address the problem that exists. And I think if there's a trust in the community that law enforcement understands that the communities may be dealing with their own mental health issues, their own trauma, and that the community understands that law enforcement's bringing their share of mental health issues, if you have that mutual trust, I think that's going to lead to a better understanding and the ability to move forward where maybe people have a better appreciation where both sides are coming from. So I think it starts with that community trust with law enforcement.
Very good, thank you. Chaplain?
Yes, sir. I think just to realize a simple principle for mental health for me is to realize I have a sphere of influence. That means there's people I can interact with, whether I be at work, whether I be a neighbor to someone, whether I'm doing a job. And evil's number one tool is to get me upset about the things I have no control over until it affects the things I do. So taking personal responsibility to say, I can make the world a better place. I can discover why I'm here. I can learn a skill set that can help me to be a more valuable a server of mankind, and to take ownership of that and let the rest of the stuff in the world that's happening, I can't do anything about it. All I can do is be faithful with my sphere of influence.
Very good, thank you. Judge?
Dr. Chavis, all the evidence tells us that there is no substitute for a good start in life. Healthy families raise healthy communities. There is no substitute for people who have good mental health, because then we evade the crisis entirely. Parents raising their kids and being responsible for them, kids listening to the good influences around them, whether they're pastors or police officers, doctors. We have to listen to each other better, but there is no substitute for a good family raising kids and being an influence on the people around them, sir.
Thank you. Well, before going to Dr. Caine, let's follow up, Judge. From your vantage point, are there the kind of programs that we need that revisit the importance of family? Because, you know, I know some communities have family courts or family counselors, but in a lot of our communities, the point that Dr. Caine made earlier, the social determinants, poverty has decimated some of our family structures. Our household, and then you put on top of it now the pandemic. The pandemic has been excruciating, particularly in African American and Latino communities, not only in terms of the highest mortality rate, but we had all these pre-existing conditions before the pandemic that has made us much more vulnerable. So you put all this stuff together, and you have heightened stress on what you say is most important in the family. But from a resource perspective, in this city, in this county, are there the kind of resources allocated to help families hold together during these periods of stress?
The clear answer is no, Dr. Chavis, but part of that is we're not allocating them correctly either. If we're waiting on government to solve all these problems, police officers can't do it, prosecutors and judges can't, public health sector can't either. But raising healthy families, especially the evidence tells us that healthy, intact families, to the extent they can care for each other and love each other, that's what young people crave, to know that they're safe, that they're cared about. You can do it with one parent, it's harder. Two parents predict more success faster. Poverty is endemic, but it's much worse if a woman is left in poverty with kids because she's been abandoned by a man who doesn't care for her. Kids know if they're safe, and that's always the best predictor of good outcomes going forward. But if we're not going to love each other and be accountable for it, money isn't going to be the answer for that either. You know plenty of folks who don't have a lot of money, as I do, who are happy and healthy because they care for each other, they stick together, they hold each other accountable. And you can tell someone with love, you're not on the right path and here's a better way, we'll help you do it. That's one reason I love the organization here called Fathers and Families so much. They model good behavior, but they also help with resources like transportation and classes and volunteer work and mentoring, right? Coach Dungy's famous because he doesn't just model good fatherhood, he shares it with other men. And there's nothing more powerful than a manly example to another man, except a manly example to his son.
Thank you. Dr. Caine,
Wow. So you know,
overcoming the stigma.
just real quickly,
Yes,
and this is a woman's prerogative, so I'm going to give more than one answer.
that's okay. You can take that prerogative.
I think it is so critical that we have to address the stigma. Law enforcement won't even, they know they need help, but they're not going to do it because they don't want it to leak out that they're perceived as weak. We don't have access to mental health providers if you have no insurance all the time. And we have hospitals like Ashkenazi community health centers too, but we don't have enough mental health providers. But if we can reach and address the poverty, people who've worked hard, they're hard workers, they don't always like to have a handout. They want to be able to do things for themselves, make their own money and pay for things. Yes. They don't want to have a life growing up, well, I got to go to this food pantry, I'll get this. I may have to go to this urgency to get my light bill on. Let's address the poverty, let's address the stigma, and let's have sufficient mental health resources for the people out there who can utilize it. If you do those three things, hey, I'm good.
Very good. Let's give our panel a hand. They've done an excellent job overcoming the stigma of mental health. And once again, I want to thank the community of Indianapolis, thank the Bridge Forum, thank the Virginia Foundation, Attorney General Hill. This has been good. This has been great. And I think we have a lot of clues now that we need to follow up on how to remove the stigma of mental health. God bless you all, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chavis. Thank you to our distinguished panelists. We are preparing for a keynote address from the United States Surgeon General, so we're checking the connection right now to see if he's available. How are we doing back there? Okay. All right. Looks like we're still trying to make that connection. Dr. Chavis, come back up. I want you to stay close by while he does give his keynote address, because I know there's going to be some questions that we get an opportunity to present to him as we go through that. So we're looking for the connection. Come on back up, Dr. Chavis. And if there's any other dialogue you want to get from our panelists, we're going to take an opportunity to do that. Technology, my good people. So they'll give us a wave when they're ready. So if you want to continue just some other additional discussion while we're waiting.
So one of the things that I did not get a chance to say is that the messaging increasingly is coming through these devices. So while even in a close family situation, Judge, a lot of young people today, and not people who are not so young, this is their source of information. And unfortunately, in social media, there's a lot of things that are valuable, invaluable, truth, but there's also a lot of stuff that's not true, that is feeds the stereotype, feeds the fear. Dr. Caine, one reason why a study just shown that African Americans over-index on social media is because of trying to respond to the sense of isolation, of social alienation. And the problem is that in our messaging, say from law enforcement or from the community, even NAACP, we have to utilize methods of dissemination information that gets to the audience that needs to hear it. And so one of the things I didn't get a chance to ask the panel is how we utilize technology particularly media, social media, in addressing some of these problems. Like right now, I know in some police departments, when there's a crisis going in the community, they put it out on Twitter or Instagram so that people will hear the official voice of the police department, because there's some things that are out there that may not be accurate. But I don't know from a mental health perspective if we're utilizing social media that way. Do you know, Dr. Caine?
We are a little bit, we definitely need to do more. You know, people with the social media, you can get like tips for the day in order to make you feel good about your mental health. And tips to say, these are things that can help improve your mental health. And also, I think it's so important to hear good stories. You know, we are so overwhelmed with just negative stories, one after another. We need to have a conscientious effort to talk about the good things that happen between law enforcement and the communities, what they're doing related to providing services out there in the community. We don't hear enough of the good things.
All right.
And so, but tips how to help you with your mental health, but even tips for you to even recognize the symptoms of mental health. That can be tips or messages from a social media standpoint. You might not even know, I'm just so tired I can't get out of bed.
Is there a hotline that people can call? I know there's a hotline for suicide, but is there a hotline for people to call? For example, before the family calls the police, given a situation of mental instability in the home, is there another place they can call?
Yes, so a lot of locations have what they call the mental health associations. Here's like Mid-America Mental Health, and a lot of them have hotlines where if you need to talk to someone, you're really stressed out, you can call that number and have a counselor talk to you. But what happens is sometimes these programs come and go based on funding that they receive. What's their ability to do fundraising? Are federal dollars or state dollars impacted by this? So we need our state legislators, our federal legislators to really put more money related to these social messages.
Exactly.
One of the good things, Doctor, about these telephones is what Dr. Caine would tell us, and that is consistency of engagement is hugely important if you want to get better outcomes. So one of the biggest struggles we have in public health, and especially mental health, is keeping people engaged, especially if you're not very likely to take your medication or you have trouble keeping appointments. This phone can be a godsend. If there's an alarm that goes off every day to tell you when to take your medication, that's a huge help. And during the pandemic, we've really exploded our ability to have online services. So if instead of going down to a public building and waiting your turn, you can just pick up your phone and talk to your counselor, what a blessing that is for people who have trouble getting there and back. You know, transportation's a huge barrier to poor people getting services.
Right.
But if
it's
we're
also telemedicine now.
Yes, sir.
Where people actually talk to their dentists, their
Doctor,
physicians,
healthcare professionals.
virtually. Yes. We ready? I think that my time has expired, but I know Pastor Reynolds, we're going to get your questions right after the Attorney General. Okay. Right after the Surgeon General. Right.
Thank you, Dr. Chavis. I heard that we do have the U.S. Surgeon General coming on board. I'm going to give a quick introduction. For our keynote address, I have the great and maybe once-in-a-lifetime privilege to introduce our United States Surgeon General, Vice Admiral, and Dr. Jerome Adams. Dr. Adams is the 20th Surgeon General of the United States. As a Surgeon General, Dr. Adams holds the rank of Vice Admiral in the U.S. Public Health Services Commissions Corps. In this capacity, he oversees the operations of more than 6,000 uniformed health officers who serve in nearly 800 locations around the world, promoting, protecting, and advancing the health and safety of our nation. Dr. Adams received his bachelor's degrees in both biochemistry and psychology from the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, a Master of Public Health degree from the University of California at Berkeley, and a medical degree from Indiana University, School of Medicine. He has been a leader in numerous professional organizations, including the American Medical Association, the American Society of Anesthesiologists, the Indiana State Medical Association, and the Indiana Society. And Dr. Adams is also the former Health Commissioner of Indiana, where he led the state's responses to Ebola, Zika, and to the largest HIV outbreak in the United States related to injection drug use. Please join me in welcoming our nation's doctor and the 20th Surgeon General of the United States, Dr. Jerome Adams. Please turn your attention toward the screen.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for the kind introduction. And hello, Dr. Caine. She's one of my really good buddies, one of my mentors, and it's always good to see her warming up the crowd for me. Let me start by applauding you for coming together today to address the challenges at the intersection of mental health and law enforcement. COVID-19 has changed our lives and our world as we know it. And the pandemic has also shown a bright light on some deep-rooted issues in our society that impact all of us. In order to discuss mental health in communities of color, in law enforcement, as well as in the broader community, I believe it's crucial to first address the unique contributors to health, or lack thereof, that too often exist in these communities. According to a 2017 report from the American Psychiatric Association, rates of mental illness in African Americans are similar to those of the general population, but disparities exist in regards to mental health services. African Americans often receive lower quality care and lack access to culturally competent care. So it's not that there's something wrong with us, separate from other people in the population. It's that we don't have the same opportunities to be healthy. In addition to health care, we cannot overlook the role that racism plays in the prevalence of mental health in communities of color. And you all may have seen that the American Medical Association just this past weekend made it their policy that racism should be recognized as a public health problem. As Mental Health America puts it, racism is a mental health issue because racism causes trauma. And I know when we say racism, that sometimes raises people's antennas, but again, understand that racism causes trauma, and trauma causes mental illnesses which need to be taken seriously. There is a direct line between one and the other, and then the endpoint. People of color experience life differently than their white counterparts. I think we can all agree that. Obvious and subtle acts of racism lead to a heavier mental health burden that can affect individuals and entire communities. And of course, I can't speak today without addressing George Floyd's death and the climate these past few months. George Floyd was the same age I am, and I can't help think that that could have been me. That could have been me pulled over for speeding 5 miles over the speed limit, or me pulled over for a busted taillight, or me seen as just a black man and not the Surgeon General of the United States because I'm casually dressed in a hoodie and tennis shoes and running gear. The fact is, when I saw what happened to George Floyd, I thought that could have been me on the side of the road with a knee in my neck. And as I said earlier, racism towards individuals affects entire communities, the individuals in those communities and the law enforcement officers who serve those communities. And that's why so many people are angry and frustrated, because they didn't see George Floyd alone. They saw themselves. They saw their faces there with a knee on their necks. Additionally, George Floyd was one individual on a list of many people of color who've been wrongfully killed by people on duty. When with each death, the mental health toll to the community and to the law enforcement officers increases. While people of color experience obvious racism and bigotry, the subtle traumas are what we can't overlook. I've personally been stopped by security guards in grocery stores and shopping centers and accused of things that I didn't do. Again, even now as Surgeon General of the United States. And over time, these experiences shape the way that people in communities of color navigate the world, react to the world, and especially in regards to encounters with law enforcement officers. So we need to understand that as a backdrop. Now, I want to talk a little bit about mental health in the law enforcement community. And in preparing for this talk, I became acutely aware that there is a shortage of information focused on mental health in the law enforcement community. And this needs to change. So again, I applaud you for starting and building upon today's dialogue so that gaps like these are identified and addressed. According to an article published earlier this year in the American Journal of Criminal Justice, the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic on officer stress, mental health, resiliency, and misconduct is significant. Those in law enforcement have some of the most taxing and stressful jobs you can think of. They regularly encounter violence, work long hours, and deal with constant criticism and frequent mistrust from the public. I can tell you all, I can relate to you right about now. But as a result, we know that you're more likely than the general population to suffer from depression, experience familial conflict, misuse substances, and even at higher risk to attempt suicide. As the death of George Floyd affected communities of color, resulting in protests and conflict with police officers, as well as the ensuing impacts on a broader sense, we know that it's also affected police officers, their family and loved ones, and entire communities. In the article I mentioned earlier, it was noted that officers facing continued stress through repeated protest and viral exposure may engage in maladaptive behaviors that can take the form of future police misconduct. So again, these things viciously feed on one another. Specifically, officers targeted as a result of other officers' behavior or governmental lockdowns are likely to feel angry and may act to protect themselves, defend themselves, shield themselves. While there's much work to be done, initiatives are underway to improve mental health for officers, a priority for the National Institute of Justice. One of the most notable advances has been the passage of the Law Enforcement Mental Health and Wellness Act, an important step Congress took in 2017 to improve the delivery of and access to mental health and wellness services that will help our nation's more than 800,000 federal, state, local, and tribal law enforcement officers. As important as it is to increase access to quality mental health services for both communities of color and law enforcement officials who serve those communities, I want to just bring it home by saying the greatest barrier that we face today is stigma. I truly believe stigma is our biggest killer. It kills more people than cigarettes, than heroin, than sugary sweetened beverages. And unless our loved ones and their families feel comfortable saying, I need help, we will never be able to reach those who actually truly need it the most. While there's been much progress in the past few years, there's still significant stigma that people of color experience in regards to mental health. Similarly, in law enforcement, there's a perception that officers must always portray strength, a bravado, and the act of seeking help for mental health issues is consequently seen as and portrayed as being weak. We need to change that. This couldn't be further from the truth for officers or for any other human being. So I want you all to hear me when I say, as Surgeon General of the United States, the nation's doctor, mental health is no different than physical health. We simply cannot separate the head from the rest of the body when we think about, when we talk about, when we consider health, or else the entire body will suffer. And additionally, the perception of feeling judged or looked down upon can dissuade people of color and law enforcement officials alike from seeking appropriate care. This can lead to unaddressed health issues, mental and physical, and often lead again to destructive coping mechanisms, substance misuse, suicide, again, acting out while on the job and doing things that they wouldn't ordinarily do if they weren't under such stress and they had a recognition across the agency of what it took to truly have mental health and wellness in all of their officers. My motto as Surgeon General has always been better health through better partnerships, because progress in these deep-seated, long-standing issues can only be achieved through effective collaborations, open dialogue like the dialogue you're having today, and a deep commitment across sectors. And that's why I want to close with a few asks for you today. First, continue to foster dialogues like the one you're having today. Don't let this just be a one-time thing. Further the conversation in your local communities, seeking to understand each other's perspectives and appreciating experiences that may not be your own, and doing so with compassion will lead us all to better physical and mental health. one of the most powerful grand rounds that I helped organize was when we actually brought in law enforcement officers to speak to medical residents about what they went through on a daily basis. Second, continue moving your communities from a solely criminal justice-based approach to one that focuses partnerships on addressing the underlying public health issues that really cause a lot of these criminal justice issues. This isn't just the ethical thing to do, but it's the more effective thing to do. Third, recognize the presence and power of stigma. Speak out and encourage others to share their stories, because by doing so, the power of stigma to keep us from seeking help disappears. The stronger that foundation of trust in our communities, the better equipped we'll all be to solve this crisis and to face, or better yet, prevent the next one. And then finally, I want you all to know that there are things we can do to protect ourselves from COVID right now, because COVID is causing some of this stress, as I mentioned earlier. My 3 W's: wash your hands frequently and thoroughly, wear your mask to protect others, and watch your distance. If we do these things, it's been proven that we can slow the spread of COVID, get back to normal sooner, and start to tackle some of these difficult issues that are being exacerbated by the pandemic. Thank you all for having me. I look forward to the Q&A, and I remain steadfast in my resolve to use our scars, losses, and lessons learned in this challenging time as a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to recognize some of the fundamental flaws in our system and to build healthier, more resilient, and more just communities. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Adams. Let's give him a round of applause for his keynote address. And what we're going to do right now is bring up Dr. Chavis to present a couple of questions for the U.S. Surgeon General. Thank you.
Surgeon General Adams, thank you so much. We're all very proud of you, sir, as the Surgeon General of the United States. I just want to let you know that here in Indianapolis, across the state of Indiana, and I would say across America, we're very proud of your leadership, and we thank you for your contribution to help our country, particularly during this pandemic, to help us get through it with sound health advice, sound health strategies and programs, and we appreciate it. We've gotten some questions from the audience and from around the state in anticipation of your keynote address. The first question is, what kind of encouragement would you have for police officers or law enforcement officers working in high-stress neighborhoods in order to get over the stigma of mental health?
Well, it's a great place to start, and we know that police officers, firefighters, and EMS personnel are frequently the first people at the scene responding to a crisis or emergency. And they may experience significant stress or be exposed to traumatic events in carrying out their jobs. We have to remember that, and it seems simple to say, but these folks are constantly being traumatized as they respond. Public servants of all kinds are valiant in their effort and commitment, and I certainly wouldn't classify this as an easy time. Officers working in high-stress neighborhoods are doing courageous work. And courage doesn't mean that you get afraid. It means that you don't let fear stop you. And so I'd encourage those who are working in this field, feeling downtrodden and exhausted, to remember there's no such thing as a bulletproof cop. The officers who protect us must be protected against incapacitating physical, mental, and emotional health problems, as well as the hazards of their jobs. Your wellness and safety are crucial to our wellness and safety. And your colleagues and agencies, as well as your communities, I think, owe it to you to recognize that the more we do to put you in the best possible position to respond, the more we do to support you, the more we do to give you those wraparound that will enable you to really be your best self, the better it is for all of us.
Thank you very much. The next question is, what resources are available to assist law enforcement, mental health, particularly at the federal level as the Surgeon General?
Well, good mental and psychological health is important for everyone, including those who work in law enforcement, to be effective. Recognizing the unique risks for first responders, the federal government has made specific efforts to support their mental health. In September of this year, the Department of Justice's Office of Community-Oriented Policing Services, or COPS office, announced $4.5 million in grants for the Law Enforcement Mental Health and Wellness Act program. These funds are used to improve the delivery of and access to mental health and wellness services for law enforcement through training and technical assistance, demonstration projects, implementation and promising practices related to peer mentoring, mental health and wellness, and suicide prevention programs. And I remind all of you about SAMHSA's national helpline, 1-800-662-HELP. This is confidential, free, 24 hours a day, and it provides information in English and in Spanish for individuals and family members facing mental and/or substance use disorders. Again, confidential, so no matter who you are, you can feel safe calling. And it provides referrals to local treatment facilities, support groups, and community-based organizations. You can also look up on Google the Police Mental Health Collaboration, or PMHC Toolkit, a resource supported by the Bureau of Justice to provide communities with best practices and other resources for addressing law enforcement's response to mental health crises. And then the final point I'd make, because 20% of police officers are prior military service, is that there's a veterans crisis line that you can also look up on Google. I think it's important for this population to know about this resource because we lose 16 veterans a day to suicide. So connect with the Veterans Crisis Line to reach caring, qualified responders within the Department of Veterans Affairs.
Thank you. What do you see as the biggest challenges facing law enforcement mental health today?
Well, I think we're seeing a tremendous increase in violence, especially towards law enforcement officials, and that bothers me. It bothers me deeply. It's linked towards nationwide criticism, and if we're going to call it what it is, a growing dislike, hatred towards public servants in general, but particularly law enforcement and first responders in far too many cases. There's been a lack of public support for law enforcement, resulting in a stereotyping of all police officers and law enforcement officers as bad. We know that you're getting longer and longer schedules because the environment I mentioned means that fewer and fewer people are going into law enforcement, causing the people who stay behind to have to work harder, work longer, and get more stressed out. And while this has improved, the lack of conversation around mental health is still apparent. As I mentioned, we need to get over this machismo, this bravado that talking about mental health, particularly if you're a law enforcement officer, is seen as weak. We know there's real PTSD in the community from major trauma, but from the smaller traumas that law enforcement officers face every single day. And then I can't be here and speak to you in this moment without mentioning the infectious disease challenges that law enforcement officers face. I was Indiana State Health Commissioner, and Dr. Caine and I had to really think hard and partner to help law enforcement officers and first responders feel safe responding to a situation where a patient could be a suspect Ebola patient. Now you've got COVID. We need to think about how these other potential environmental risk out there affect the ability of law enforcement officers to do their job. So that's probably more than what you wanted, but those are kind of the top 4 or 5 things that I think about as the biggest challenges that I see for the law enforcement community in regards to their mental and physical health.
Thank you. In terms of public perception across the country, how does the public perception about law enforcement impact the mental health?
Well, similar to how wrongful racism and bigotry affects communities of color, remember I said that's a trauma that can disproportionately and negatively affect your mental health. Constant public criticism of law enforcement leads to poor mental health in this group. So when we talk about the image of law enforcement, that's not just something we're saying to make us feel good, or I guess maybe it is, because feeling good is part of mental health. And right now, too many of our officers aren't feeling so good and are suffering poor mental health because of this stereotype that all officers are bad, that they're not doing their job. We know that officers are likely to go into situations now with the mindset that they're not being trusted. In many cases, they're being told, act as if you're not going to be trusted and that you won't be listened to. And when you go into a situation on guard like that, we know that whether you're a law enforcement officer or anyone else, you're a human being, and that can aggravate, that can incite situations. And as I mentioned before, there's an internal perception that law enforcement individuals in this role need to be strong. So I think public perception needs to really shift and look at law enforcement as human beings, as people who live and work and exist in our neighborhood. They're not supermen. I consider you all heroes, but I don't consider you to be any different than anyone else out there. If someone's constantly badgering you, telling you that you're no good, that you're harming their community. And I think from a public point of view, we've got to figure out how we partner and emphasize the good while also rooting out the bad, because I believe there's a lot more good by far than there is bad.
Thank you very much. The final question that has come, in terms of law enforcement, what are your recommendations of how personnel in the law enforcement arena can strengthen and protect their own mental health?
Great question to close on. And I would say that in order for all law enforcement officers to feel comfortable in discussing and receiving mental health care, the culture in the law enforcement community needs to change internally. And that starts at the top. Leadership has to prioritize mental health and overall wellness checks. That's a best practice. You've got to centralize mental health resources so people can easily access them. Got to partner with mental health and research organizations. It's not all on you to do alone. We don't expect you to be a psychiatrist or a psychologist. You need to strategize efficient schedules and need to educate and train officers for better understanding when they're working with communities of color. If available, join a peer support group to discuss issues that can be mutually understood by others. And as I mentioned earlier, treat mental health no differently than your physical health. You go in for a physical exam every year, schedule a mental health and wellness checkup with your physician, just as you would your annual visit. And know that as Surgeon General, I'm trying to promote integration of mental and physical health into those visits so that it's not two separate visits. It's one where we're checking you from the top down. On days when you're not on duty, really focus on self-care, spending time with family and friends, exercising, playing a sport, whatever your favorite activity is that gets your mind off of the stress of work. And remember, simple things like getting enough sleep, eating a healthy diet, and avoiding misuse of substances, whether it's alcohol, tobacco, or anything else out there, really are key to promoting mental health and wellness and a healthy body and a healthy community. So thank you all again for the opportunity to have me. Thank you for the opportunity to serve as your United States Surgeon General. And I want you to know that it has been a long time emphasis of mine, back when I was the State Health Commissioner in Indiana, to partner with our local law enforcement community, because health and security cannot be separated. You cannot have one without the other. And I want to promote healthy communities so that we can have safer and more secure communities. And I only do that by working with you. So thanks for having me today.
Thank you for your leadership, United States Surgeon General Jerome M. Adams. Let's give him another hand. Thank you so much.
Oh my, great conversation. Want to thank the Surgeon General for taking time out of his day to provide a keynote address and additionally to provide an opportunity to answer some questions. And thank you again, Dr. Chavis, for facilitating that discussion, that Q&A. As we come closer to the end of the program, we do have some final thoughts. And at this moment, we'd like to bring up Pastor Reynolds, who is the founding and senior pastor of New Revelation Christian Church and also CEO of Crown Community Development. He was here when we were back when we were in Indiana the last visit to provide an invocation, and here to provide some final thoughts. Let's please give him a warm welcome.
Thank you, Ron, and I want to thank all of the panelists for all of your passionate and rich commentary that you shared on this subject matter. I want to thank my good friend, my homeboy, AP Alan Powell, for extending this opportunity for me to participate once again. I'm glad to see that the Bridge Forum is building on the success of our previous event. I've been truly blessed and enriched by being present here today, and I'm extremely grateful for the opportunity to provide some final thoughts. And I'm glad that S is there, thoughts and not just thought. But this is what came to me as I listened to all of the rich discussion. Number one, when it comes to our public and our police, I think it's going to be critical for us to always, number one, be concerned about safety, to be concerned about humanity, and to be concerned about mental stability. In light of our conversation, again, as it relates to the public and the police, we've got to look at the public through the lens of safety, humanity, and mental stability. And we also need to look at our police through that same lens of safety, humanity, and mental stability. And along the lines of mental stability, much has been said about trauma today and post-traumatic stress disorder. And I will interject the term trauma-informed care, because everyone has experienced trauma all throughout our society. I believe anytime we engage one another, we need to be reminded that these traumas do exist. And a lot was said about the traumas that our police officers experience on a daily basis. And from moment to moment throughout the day, they're exposed to so much that leaves them traumatized. And I think along those lines, we need to begin to think about, I think, offering counseling to our police officers, maybe even more than we already do. I was thinking about the fact that if a police is involved in a shooting, you know, they'll get administrative time off because everybody knows that they've been impacted mentally by that and they need some time to gather. But in light of the information that's been shared today, there are daily traumas. And I think in light of these daily traumas, it would be great for police officers to be counseled on a regular basis to see if they are still mentally fit to serve. I think the realities of these traumas is that many officers are serving and they should no longer be serving. No fault of their own. It is a consequence of their service and the chance that they took by putting their lives on the line, by becoming police officers. We applaud them for their heroism. But at the same time, sometimes I believe they get past the point of being fit to continue to serve, and some of them need to be counseled out of the job. Other thing I want to share about, again, trauma is in the middle of all of this trauma, you know, are our youth. Nothing has been said today about our youth, whether it is the youth of a police officer or the youth who are part of our public. They are traumatized just as much as all of the adults are traumatized. One of the things that I do through Crown Community Development Corporation is operate Crown Mentoring. And I was just dealing with a youth this week, talking about what they have experienced in 2020. And one of the youth shares, what I remember the most about 2020 is the fact that my brother was shot and killed, shot in the back of the head. So our youth are dealing with a lot of trauma. And we need to be thinking about how trauma is impacting the police, how trauma is impacting the public. And lastly, I'll just add that we need to continue to be consistent in recognizing the need for looking at holistic health. I thank Dr. Caine because she kept going there by addressing a lot of the issues that face our community systemically. So we need to be thinking about holistic health. That means mental, that means physical, as well as spiritual. As a pastor, I'm going to take advantage of the opportunity just to share scripture, because scripture addresses, again, the spirit, the soul, and the body. The word of God says that God desires that we prosper and be in good health, even as our souls prosper. We're encouraged in the word of God to be anxious for nothing, but in everything, make our prayers and supplications known to God. And he promises to give us the peace of God that surpasses all understanding, that will guard our hearts and our minds. Thank you again to all of our panelists for your sharing. Thank you to Alan Powell. Thank you to Hero Zona. Thank you to all who are making this event possible. Thank you, A.G. Hill. And it is certainly an honor to be able to speak behind the U.S. Surgeon General, Dr. Jerome Adams. God bless you.
Thank you so much, Pastor Reno, for your final thoughts. We appreciate you and all that you've done to support both of our visits in Indiana. Now, for our closing remarks, it is my distinct pleasure to bring to the podium a true trailblazer, a big humble giant who doesn't like to be in front of the microphone, more or less in front of a camera. Alan A.P. Powell is the chairman of A.P. & Associates Strategic Alliances. He's a true servant leader, a U.S. Army Gulf War veteran, national strategist, and humanitarian who recently led the largest COVID-19 testing effort in the United States, and that happened in the #1 underserved community in Arizona, as reported nationally on CNN, Good Morning America, and all of the local Arizona channels, and many national TV outlets across America. Amongst his many national awards, he led the largest national veteran summit in partnership with the United States Chamber of Commerce, Hiring Our Heroes. This native of Indiana, in his early years, was also one of the nation's top entertainment executives in America. Along with Aaron Bear, he is the founder of the Arizona Foundation and the vision behind today's Bridge Forum. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Alan A.P. Powell.
I just want to thank everybody for your participation. I want to thank A.G. Hill for buying into the vision of why this is important for the state of Indiana. I want to thank my good friend Tony Mason for stepping up on behalf of the Honorable George Dean back in Arizona. But for me, this is a sad day for me and a good day for me. 33 years ago, my father died in the state of Indiana. So when I leave here today, I'm going to go visit him at Crown Hill. But it made me let me know how far I've come as an individual to be able to come back to Indiana and put something this together that's substantial in trying times in America. So I just want everybody here to when you go and you leave here today, think about some of the stuff you said, how you can share it with people, because people need somebody to talk to today in America. People need somebody to lean on. More people need to get back into the church, our youth, need to get back into the storehouse, need to listen to our teachers, to our leaders, politicians. But one thing we all have to remember, we're in this thing together. This is the 16th Bridge Forum since Ferguson started, and this will be the second we've done on mental health. The ultimate thing for this bridge was live together, work together equals respect. So God continue to bless you all, and God continue to bless the United States of America.
Thank you, Mr. Alan A.P. Powell. And a big thanks again to our sponsors and supporters. Again, a special thanks to AP of AP and Associates, Strategic Alliances, Mr. Powell, Aaron Bear and Company, Mr. Aaron Bear, the Indiana Attorney General, Curtis Hill, and his team, Mary Beth, Jean Marie, Sam, and Garrett. Thank you all. We can't thank you enough. Dr. Benjamin Chavis, what could I say? I mean, you've been fighting this good fight for 60 years, yet still here you are in Indiana, again, helping this state and these communities continue to bridge the gap. I also want to mention M.P.H, who was instrumental, along with Pastor Richard Reynolds. We could not have executed this forum without your strong support. H.B., thanks for sharing your poem. And a big thanks to our guest speakers, and especially our panelists for sharing your time and your expertise with us today. On behalf of the Arizona Foundation, I just want to say, let's please all take care of each other. God bless you all, and God bless the United States of America. That concludes our forum. Thank you. Do you want to get a group photo of the panelists? If you guys can stick around 1 second, I want to get a group photo of the panelists. And HB, AG Hill,